In 1776, 13 fractured American colonies decided to pick a fight with the undisputed military heavyweight of the world, the British Empire. By themselves, the rebels faced mathematically impossible odds against a highly trained, deeply entrenched imperial army. But the colonies didn't fight alone. The American cause survived because an unexpected savior stepped in to provide the crucial money, weapons, and naval support required to keep the rebellion from collapsing. That savior was France. This creates an immediate historical contradiction. Looking at the text of the Declaration of Independence, the Americans were explicitly fighting to destroy monarchical rule. They wanted to establish a republic built from the ground up on Enlightenment ideals of self-governance. Yet their new benefactor was the precise opposite. France was ruled by an absolute monarch. The French king concentrated wealth and political power to an extreme degree, far beyond the limits placed on the British crown. The French crown had zero interest in democratic revolutions. Across Europe, ruling classes actively censored the political ideas coming out of America, viewing them as dangerous radicalism that threatened their own grip on power. France's intervention had absolutely nothing to do with a shared love for liberty. Supporting the colonies was a calculated, opportunistic strike meant to achieve geopolitical revenge. To understand that grudge, we have to rewind a decade to the 7 Years' War, better known in North America as the French and Indian War. Looking at this map from 1765, we can see the catastrophic outcome of that conflict for France. They suffered a humiliating defeat, forcing them to surrender nearly all of their North American territories directly to the British. Pulling back, the sheer scale of the British footprint becomes clear. This massive territorial shift skewed the global balance of power. With North America secured, Britain stood effectively unchallenged, leaving France at a severe strategic disadvantage. Fast forward back to 1776. When the American uprising began, France's initial reaction was highly cautious. Rather than openly declaring war, they began sending secret, off-the-book shipments of weapons and supplies to the rebels. The French crown needed a low-risk way to test the waters. They wanted to see if the colonial militia could actually endure a prolonged conflict and successfully bleed the British military before committing a single French soldier to the fight. The survival of the American cause in those early years was dictated by a cold, calculated French stress test. The rebels had to prove they were a viable military investment. Once it became clear the rebels could hold their ground and endure the heavy attrition of war, France made its move. They officially recognized the United States and established an open, formal military alliance. This commitment was actively secured by men like Benjamin Franklin, who spent the war in Paris working tirelessly as a diplomat to keep the French funds and forces flowing across the Atlantic. France viewed the American continent as a strategic pressure point, a way to trap the bulk of the British Army thousands of miles away from home. With British forces tied up fighting George Washington, France simultaneously launched surprise secondary attacks against British military and economic targets in the Caribbean and all the way in India. To completely paralyze British strategy, the French even began drawing up preparations for a potential direct invasion of the British home islands themselves. America had become the anvil, holding the British military in place, while the French Navy struck global interests as the hammer. The colonies provided the medium through which two superpowers settled an older global score. By 1779, French intervention had shifted what began as a localized colonial tax revolt into a sprawling, multi-front world war. This relentless global pressure became the ultimate breaking point for the British Empire. They were simply too overwhelmed by the sheer scale of a multi-front naval war to maintain control over the colonies. This document is what finalized the outcome. In 1783, the American War of Independence officially ended in absolute victory when representatives signed the Treaty of Paris. Yet the newly formed United States owed an overwhelming debt to the French crown. Without that massive global military intervention draining British resources, the colonial rebellion would likely have been starved out and crushed. Soon, other powers like Spain and the Netherlands joined the fray, further proving that the international scope of the conflict was driven by deep-seated European rivalries, not an endorsement of American democratic ideals. The birth of the United States resulted in a successful republic, but that victory was ultimately the highly successful byproduct of European superpowers playing a ruthless, calculating game of realpolitik.